the third lecture in the web series, Institution Building and Nurturing Initiatives in Independent India, which is going to be delivered by none other than Professor Ved Prakash, former chairman of UGC.
Good morning and greetings to all of you on the occasion of National Education Day 2021. The Education Day in the 75th year of Indian independence is a very special occasion as it enjoins us to remind ourselves how the permeation of education in an inclusive manner has helped to propel the progress of the nation. There can be no more appropriate person than our speaker today to tell us reliably how an intellectual giant who was the first education minister of India for over 12 years uninterrupted and who laid the solid foundations of the academic institutions for nation building. Professor Ved Prakash was the secretary of UGC during the golden jubilee of UGC in 2003, and he was the chairperson of the UGC during the commemoration event to mark the completion of 60th year of UGC on December 28, 2013. An updated version of the Dr. Kavita Sharma's book on 50 years of UGC was released by the Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh in Vigyan Bhavan on that day. I sought a copy of the said book from Professor Ved Prakash immediately after the event. He had only one copy for himself on that day. So I solicited an assurance from him that he would visit Punjab University, the alma mater of first chairperson of UGC, namely Dr. Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar, on the next Independence Day. And we would webcast an address by Professor Ved Prakash to all the universities of India via the National Knowledge Network. And we indeed did that. Professor Ved Prakash visited us on August 14, and he provided us a written transcript of his proposed address, which was titled Impetus to Research in Indian Universities, Strategic Planning and Work Plan. He had printed that transcript and inserted into a new edition of the biography of Dr. Bhatnagar by his son, A.S. Bhatnagar. Professor Ved Prakash delivered his address to a packed audience in the PU auditorium. He spoke extempo for nearly an hour. His address was so moving and compelling that we transcribed his spoken text and brought out a booklet containing his written text as well as his spoken text. I am personally looking forward to another highly educative address from Professor Ved Prakash today. I read all his articles and he has been writing very, very prolifically in the media ever since he completed his term as chairman UGC. Thank you very much.
Of Professor Ved Prakash, because I worked with him for almost 3.5 years when he was chairman University Grants Commission. Actually, I am honored that I can listen to his structured speech after a very, very long time. Dr. Grover talked about talking extempore, but if I know the way I know Professor Ved Prakash, he spends days and days researching and writing a kind of algorithm to how to go about the speech, and he speaks exceedingly well. And I asked him the morning today, and he's done it. So today's speech is going to be something which is out of the blue. You really enjoy what he speaks. And when I joined UGC in 2014 March, after the initial learning curve of about a week, 10 days, I can still remember the way Professor Ved Prakash gave me a free hand, the trust he had in me. He's one person who gave us the liberty to develop the way he wanted to develop. The only thing he wanted was honesty and efficiency, and that's exactly what we gave him. And his target-driven approach was all that was required, and that's all what he desired. But the most important was when he would sit in the evening, his Urdu couplets used to be very good. And, we really used to enjoy the evenings with him, the way he presented those Urdu couplets in that. But when you're a member of the Education Day, I always reminded of the photograph of Maulana Azad, which was in the commission room, which is a very unique photograph with Maulana Azad and Pandit Nehru being in that photograph. And I was remembering it today morning, the way it was, what a historic photograph it was. I would also like to bring to your notice that during the tenure of Professor Ved Prakash, he was the longest serving chairman of University Grants Commission. He spent almost 6 years, which is probably never going to be repeated in history. But most of the initiatives which are now part of National Education Policy 2020 were taken during his time. He always used to say that higher education is an aircraft carrier. It cannot turn 180 degrees, it can only turn about 2-3 degrees, 4 degrees. So let's start with something which will ultimately culminate into something which is very, very good. So I still remember when I joined under the NSQF, we designed the syllabi, we put it on the website, and that is when we started the idea of multiple entry, multi-exit, which is again a very important part of the national education policy. If Mr. Ashok Thakur is listening today, I don't know whether he's online or not, but the very first interaction we had with Mr. Ashok Thakur was regarding making NAC independent of UGC and making it an independent body so that the funding body and the accrediting body, assessment accrediting body should be separate. And look at it, what we ended up with the new education policy, national education policy, 4 verticals. Again, the initial seed was sown during time of Professor Ved Prakash. We also talk about the Academic Bank of Credit. Again, the same thing happened, with National Academic Depository was again a brainchild. We started during our time there when we both were there. And it is a precursor to the Academic Bank of Credit, and that's the way it is going about it. Regarding the teachers' development and the online training of teachers and everything, I still remember the G.S. Verma Commission report, in which one of our gurus, Professor Sharma, was a member, and we tried to implement that so that the teacher education should come to a level which is of international standards. About the academic staff colleges, because in-service training is a very, very important document and a very important requirement. So we upgraded the academic staff colleges to HRDCs, human resource development centers and faculty development centers, and so that these human resources could be trained in proper manner, the latest pedagogy and the latest research in that field. There is also the CBCS system, which is a choice-based credit system, was again introduced during the tenure of Professor Ved Prakash, where we had a very big exercise of collecting almost 200-300 people, the professors there, and designed a syllabi for 117 courses, which were put on the website as a hand-holding exercise for the various universities so they can adopt it and go about with the CBCS system. And I am happy to tell you that Guru Nanak University is the first one to adopt it, and we are very following it very rigorously. Multidisciplinarity again was part of the CBCS system, which was introduced during Professor Ved Prakash's time. So lots of other things happened, and the regulations came up. We tried to make it as neat, clean, and lean kind of a organization. But the biggest, the praise you could ever get was when one of our ministers said that University Grants Commission is the Mother Teresa of regulators. So when that was said, that was the high point of our stay in University Grants Commission. So this is all because the kind of liberty Professor Ved Prakash gave, the kind of support he gave, the kind of hand he kept on our heads of, I could see joint secretaries also here, the way he gave us the liberty to think out of the box, and that's the way it is. So with this, I conclude, and I would like to really I'm looking forward to listening to Professor Ved Prakash in a formal kind of, because he's part of my syndicate, so we meet almost every second month. That's a different story, but in formal speech, I'm listening to him for the first time after I remitted the office of Secretary of University Grants Commission. So thank you, sir. I'm looking forward to listening to you. Thank you so much.
So may I have this privilege to request Dr. Ved Prakash ji to please deliver his talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Chahal. Very good morning to everyone. I'm seeing so many esteemed colleagues of mine on the screen today. But formally, let me begin by saying, respected Shri Dharamveer ji from SPSTI, my very valued friend and colleague, Professor Arun Grover, Professor Karamjeet, Professor Jaspal Singh Sandhu, Professor Premvarji, Professor Kuhad, Vinod from IIT Kanpur, to whom I call Vinod because of my affection for him, and many other distinguished members who have joined today's National Education Day lecture. Ladies and gentlemen, at the outset, I would like to express my sincere thanks to SPSTI and Chandigarh chapter of NASI, INEAS, Indian National Science Academy, Haryana State Council, and Punjab Engineering College for organizing today's event. The theme of today's event is Institution Building and Nurturing Initiatives in Independent India. I think nothing can be more apt than this when we are celebrating 134th birthday of the first Education Minister of Independent India, Maulana Abul Kalam Azad ji. In keeping with the spirit, in fact, I chose to speak and gave this title to Professor Grover that I am going to speak Maulana Azad, a sanguine man with visionary ideas. Because Maulana was a great institution builder. No one can match with that great son of India, the way he envisioned about different shades of institutions. That is truly remarkable. Today, when the nation pays rich tributes to the first education minister on his 134th birth anniversary, I pay my rich tributes to him. We have started celebrating his birthday as National Education Day since 2008 as a mark of respect to him for his monumental contribution to the cause of education. The visionary leader is a transformer, cutting through complex problems that leave other strategists stranded. It's not easy even for a visionary to paint a visionary future and also to chart the map that gets you there. But Maulana did it because he was out of the ordinary. A stalwart of the freedom movement, Maulana joined the interim government as education minister in January 1947, and he continued in the same capacity for 11 long years until his passing away in 1958. He was quite a reasonable man, apart from being a true visionary, and which is why he suited the most to the education sector. Maulana was given a far more arduous task than to his contemporaries in the Council of Ministers by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. There was no national system of education. The country was rock bottom with 18% literacy rate and 200,000 primary schools. Some of us would not even believe that we had only 13,596 upper primary schools in the country at that point in time, and only 7,416 secondary and senior secondary institutions in our country, with 500 odd colleges and only 27 universities. This was all that Maulana had inherited in the form of infrastructure on which he had to lay the foundation of modern India. As it is, he had insurmountable challenges, which became even more daunting in the absence of proper system of teacher preparation and scarcity of resources. Although Maulana had a basket full of problems throughout his tenure, but he, being a visionary, had the knack to set priorities and maximize the potential of limited resources. This is what our educational leaders must learn from him or get inspiration from him. He chose to focus on teacher preparation as a case of first thing first. He knew that the country could not move forward without a well-established system of teacher preparation, which was almost non-existent in the country. So soon after independence, he established the Central Institute of Education in Delhi in 1947. And while he was laying the foundation of this institution, he had said that the institution would not merely be a model institute for teacher preparation, but a pioneering center of research in school education. I'll come to school education a little later, Maulana knew it for sure that higher education was the real pathway for social and economic development. And therefore, within a span of a few months after his taking over the office of the Minister of Education, he appointed the University Education Commission under the chairmanship of Dr. Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan to suggest improvement and extension that would be desirable to suit present and future requirements of the country. He was also equally alarmed with the range of development in engineering and technology, which he thought could not be achieved without establishing the premier institutions in the field of engineering and allied disciplines. He took cues from both the Sarkar Committee and the recommendations which were made by Dr. Radhakrishnan Commission and acted so swiftly that he founded the first IIT in 1950 at Kharagpur. Professor Premvarth is the proud product of that institution. And while inaugurating the IIT Kharagpur on 18th August 1951, he said, and I quote, "I felt that of the many tasks of educational reconstruction that faced the country, two were of paramount urgency. The first was the creation of a nationwide system of basic education for all children of school-going age, and the second, the provision of facilities of the highest type of education in the technical field," unquote. He fulfilled both. He laid the foundation of 4 more IITs on paper, though they were formally opened up after his demise on 22nd February 1958. No sooner Maulana received the recommendation of the University Education Commission in 1949, then he realized that higher education cannot be strengthened without rejuvenating school education. So he set up another commission, the Secondary Education Commission, thinking that that would be the feeder sector for higher education, under the chairmanship of Dr. Mudaliar in 1952, to examine the existing system of secondary education in the country and to suggest measures to improve it. The commission made a number of vital recommendations leading to improvement in the methods of teaching and integration of vocational education, establishment of the National Council of Educational Research and Training, and setting up of the regional colleges of education, to name a few. Like a true statesperson, Maulana was also keenly interested in promoting India's external cultural relations through cultural exchange with other countries. And for that, he founded the Indian Council for Cultural Relations in 1950. It paved the way for the establishment of a number of other councils, like the Indian Council of Historical Research, Indian Council of Philosophical Research, and Indian Council of Social Science Research, though they came into existence a little later after his demise. Maulana believed as much in fine arts and music as in science and technology. You will rarely find such a visionary. So he was also instrumental in the establishment of a number of academies like Sangeet Natak Academy in 1953, Sahitya Academy in 1954, and Lalit Kala Academy for the promotion of cultural and national identity, which he had inaugurated on 5th August 1954. Maulana Azad is credited to have laid out a massive roadmap for all kinds of educational institutions to put India on the path of cultural harmony and scientific advancement. And which is why I had said that there is no match to him insofar as institution building in India is concerned. It was during his tenure that the country had witnessed the first wave of incredible expansion of public institutions. And that was the time when the country was trading on a sluggish economy and is spending only 0.68% of a tiny GDP on education. Which is why I had said that the leaders of educational institutions need to learn, need to derive inspiration from him as to how to maximize the limited resources that we have at our command. He was the first person who envisioned as early as in 1950, another remarkable thing which one could notice in the in the life of Maulana Azad. He was the first person who envisioned in 1950 that education in the country, which was a state subject then, could not reach the desired standards without acceptable level of interventions from the central government. And see, it took 26 years for the seeds sown by him to sprout when education was brought onto the concurrent list of the Union of India in 1976. Maulana was the most distinguished scholar and a well-regarded statesperson who had never done anything that could be seen as controversial from any social or political prism. He was a true nationalist and a staunch follower of Mahatma Gandhi. He was a great advocate of social inclusion and unity in diversity. This is what he preached and practiced throughout his life. Having regard to that, he had preached for the implementation of three-language formula. This was as complex an issue then as it is today, but he brought it forward for the first time before the Central Advisory Board of Education in 1956, with a view to evolving a consensus in the light of socio-political needs and constitutional obligations. He worked throughout his life for the democratization of education, as he held a belief that it could alone ensure social progress and real empowerment. He was honestly committed about building a flexible and a resilient system of education wherein equity and quality go hand in hand. There are very few countries in the world, in fact, which have ensured the nurturance of equity and quality together. Indeed, he was a remarkable person of extraordinary qualities who possessed the inner strength to be truthful to himself and to others. It was because of his exceptional qualities and scintillating performance that he was awarded with the highest civilian award of the Republic of India, Bharat Ratna, in 1992. People of the country indeed would eternally reminisce his unparalleled contribution to the cause of education, and his persona inevitably would continue to inspire the posterity. Since his birthday is being celebrated as National Education Day today, it's an occasion to introspect and recognize what is ailing our education system and how can it be fixed under the current circumstances so that we can ceaselessly keep churning out men and women of substance who develop confidence in one another and handle themselves in a noble and ethical manner. Professor Arun Grover had asked me to reflect on the evolution of three national level resource institutions, the NCERT, the NEPA, and the University Grants Commission, which were the brain children of Maulana Sahab. Fortunately, I had the rare opportunity of serving all the three organizations. Let me make an attempt to reflect on each one of them if time permits. When we got independence, regrettably, we neither had a national system of education nor any established structure of teacher education. There were very few teacher training institutions with limited provincial focus. And since there was no national focus on education, the need was felt to establish an institution of education to deal with teacher education in the country. This is how the Central Institute of Education was born out of that commitment in 1947. This was the time when school education in the country was not handled holistically. Rather, it was dealt by multiple bureaus. Bureau of Textbook, Bureau of Fundamental Education, Bureau of Secondary Education, Bureau of Vocational Education. And all these bureaus, unfortunately, were operating individualistically from different locations. So the major weak point in school education was the lack of coordination amongst various bureaus that were operating independently. This concern was noted by Maulana, and he decided to have an overarching body to deal with the school education in a holistic manner by bringing all these bureaus under it. So the government envisioned the birth of the NCERT, leading to its establishment in 1961. NCERT was given the mandate to assist and advise the government of India on matters pertaining to education, particularly school education. It was envisaged truly as a professional body to play the advisory role to the government on school education. Initially, the NCERT was founded in the form of the National Institute of Education, but later on it was rechristened into NCERT with an extended mandate of carrying out research in school education. It changed the accordingly. I mean, number of other institutions were brought into it. I'm not going to reflect on them because of the paucity of time, like the regional colleges of education, which were established on the pattern of the land grants universities of United States of America on sprawling campuses in the cities of Bhopal, Mysore, Bhubaneswar, and Ajmer. So, but what happened was that the commission, the Education Commission, in fact, made one recommendation. It said, insofar as teacher education is concerned, that this was Kothari Commission actually, which made this observation that teacher education in India cannot improve as long as it remains in isolation with itself, in isolation from school education, and in isolation with higher education. And unfortunately, it continues to be so until this day. This was such a vital recommendation that it was also reiterated by the Justice Verma Commission in 2012. But it still remains unimplemented across the states. It is only partially attempted in 2014 when a couple of central universities agreed to start 4-year integrated teacher training programs after a little gentle persuasion by the University Grants Commission. But obviously, much more needs to be done to make this a reality, as teacher education continues to be a very weak area in our education system. NCERT has undoubtedly done a commendable job in areas like teacher education, textbook development, talent identification, vocational education, guidance and counseling, achievement surveys, and education for the needs of different social groups. The NCERT was held in high esteem by the successive governments for its professionalism and monumental contribution in school education. But somehow, its professional reputation as a national resource institution got some setback in the recent past. And I'll tell you the reason for that. Since its initial mandate was extended to assist and advise the government in planning and implementation its policies and programs, this was done actually on the recommendation of Madhuri Behan Shah Committee in 1982. This has profoundly changed the role and function of the NCERT, as implementation of government policies overshadowed its invaluable evidence-based advisory support to the government. The 4-year integrated teacher preparation program offered by the regional colleges has caught up the attention of the new national education policy, but without looking into the reasons as to why this innovative model of 4-year integrated program has not gone beyond the 4 walls of the regional colleges of education for the last 58 years. The policy has stressed that by 2030, 4-year integrated B.Ed degree will be the minimum qualification for a school teacher. The 4-year integrated program has a number of issues relating to its framework and integration of cognate subjects for curriculum and pedagogy that have not been properly deliberated upon, even by the current regulator. And this is one of the serious shortcomings which at one stage even forced the regulator itself to put the entire program on hold. The RIs, the regional colleges of education, are also responsible for this malaise to some extent, since they have not made any efforts for the spread of their 4-year integrated teacher preparation model across other teacher training institutions, even though they have implemented it very successfully in their own institutions. Another shortcoming on the part of the regional colleges has been that they have not come up with any other innovative model of teacher preparation in the last 58 years, which could have fulfilled the requirements of teacher education with the changing times. NCERT can do much better a job if its initial mandate, this is the observation that I would like to make, if its initial mandate of assisting and advising the government on issues pertaining to education is restored, and the task of planning and implementing the policies of the government is transferred to the provincial agencies like that of the SCERTs and the DIETs, etc. Besides, regional colleges should also have substantial link with the NCERT headquarters, and the Department of Teacher Education of the NCERT should assume a significant leadership role in developing innovative models of teacher preparation in active collaboration with the regional colleges of education. Together, they should re-examine and revisit the structure and design of design the four-year integrated program to suit the current requirements of the contents of higher secondary education and its relevant pedagogical concerns. NCERT should work in close collaboration with the RIs, and RIs should also be associated by the NCERT both in textbook writing and research. In addition, RIs can also act as a stimulus to creating similar kind of institutions in the region as NCERT did in the establishment of the SCERT across the states. This is that can also be done. I will briefly touch upon the evolution of NIPA. This was also the brainchild of Maulana. He persuaded the UNESCO at that point in time actually, and made the UNESCO to agree to establish an Asian Regional Center for Educational Planners and Administrators. He impressed upon them and said that the Asian region also needs educational planners and administrators, and that there is no single institution for developing educational planners and administrators, and therefore we should have one. And he provided the platform to the UNESCO to establish NIPA in its earlier avatar of ARCEPA in 1962. It became Asian Institute of Educational Planning and Administration in 1965. Subsequently, it was converted into National Staff College for Educational Planners and Administrators in 1973. And NIPA, earlier NUPA, from NIPA to NUPA University, with the help of the government at that point in time, it became a deemed to be university in 2006. And subsequently, it was converted because of some compulsions again as a NIPA university in 2017. NIPA has been the focal point actually. I remember when the second national education policy, national policy on education, we used to call it, NPE, 1986 was brought out. NIPA used to be the headquarters for that. And the people in NIPA had made seminal contribution in policy formulation and policy implementation. It's a very premier organization of ours. Now I will devote a couple of minutes on the evolution of the University Grants Commission, and the credit of which goes to Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, because he acted so very swiftly on the recommendations made by the University Education Commission under the chairmanship of Dr. Radhakrishnan. University Education Commission were of the opinion that universities should be sensitive to enlightened public opinion, and that they should never let themselves be bullied or bribed. This is what was observed by the University Education Commission. Another observation was made that the right public policy has to give a university the best possible constitution. Commission realized that most of the Indian universities were incapable of resisting pressures from outside. Commission realized that the university education should have a national guarantee of minimum standards of efficiency. Commission thought that necessary safeguards could be achieved by concurrency. Since most of the universities were grossly underfinanced at that time, the University Education Commission thought that generous grants must be forthcoming from the federal government. Besides, the Commission also realized that some of the institutions dealing with applied sciences like Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, National Physical Laboratories, etc., were not with Ministry of Education. And there was no agency that could negotiate with them for securing grants for the promotion of research on the campus of the university system. This gave idea to the Commission to have a central agency which on the one hand can insulate universities from external pressures and on the other ensure maintenance of standards and provide them direct financial grants. Commission looked towards the University Grants Committee, which was formed in 1945 to deal only with 3 central universities, University of Delhi, Banaras Hindu University, and Aligarh Muslim universities. Though 2 years later, it was also empowered to deal with all other universities. This University Grants Committee did not have any funds of its own. It was only a recommendatory body, and it would recommend to Ministry of Education, which in turn would transfer its recommendation to the Ministry of Finance. Commission welcomed the existence of the University Grants Committee in its present tentative form, but to serve its full purpose, considerable changes were suggested by the Commission. Commission suggested that it should be an expert body. It should have power to allocate funds directly to the universities so that the state governments do not come in between. It should have its own funds. It should allocate capital as well as recurring grants to individual institutions. And that it should have a statutory status. And that it should also be responsible for maintenance of standards of teaching, examination and research. And that it should also provide consultation and advice to central government as also to the provincial governments. Traditionally, education in India had been a provincial concern. But Article 246 of the Constitution gave the central government the responsibility of coordination and determination of standards in institutions of higher learning. Thus, the Government of India set up an interim University Grants Commission by a resolution to advise it on the allocation of grant in aid from public funds to universities. The UGC was inaugurated by Maulana Azad in the last week of December 1953 with the noted scientists, Dr. S.S. Bhatnagar, Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar ji, as its chairman, together with 8 other members. Newly appointed UGC held its first meeting on 28 December 1953, which was jointly addressed by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru and Maulana Abul Kalam Azad. I mean, the Prime Minister and the Minister together coming down to the University Grants Commission and addressing the meeting of the Commission. Addressing the Commission, Maulana gave an assurance. See the mind of the man. He said that the government would treat Commission's recommendations as binding and would be guided by its advice. Such confidence and trust was reposed by Maulana Abul Kalam Azad ji in the University Grants Commission. And at its inaugural meeting, actually, Dr. Bhatnagar said that the success of UGC would depend entirely on the autonomy it enjoyed. Prime Minister Nehru, while inaugurating the commission, urged the commission to keep pace with the changing times and to suggest major policy decisions that would catalyze progress in the education field. Pandit Nehru hoped that UGC would evolve a policy that would bring about complete reorientation to higher education. Dr. Bhatnagar devoted very little time to the commission because of his other commitments in the ministry and CSIR, and then his passing away in 1955. But I would like to share with all the distinguished members that he tried to do something dramatic that would catch the attention of universities by raising the salary of teachers by 25% at that time. But it was opposed by C.D. Deshmukhji, who happened to be the finance minister at that time. Later on, he became the chairman of the University Grants Commission. For the fear of limitless increase in expenditure, Commission began its work in the middle of the first 5-year plan. On 30th September 1954, the government introduced a bill in the parliament to make UGC a statutory body, and Maulana Azad introduced the statement of objects and reason for that. After detailed deliberation, the UGC bill was passed in the parliament and enacted as an act in 1956, making it a statutory body. UGC Act has been amended from time to time, 1970, I think again in 1972, 85, and probably also in 84. Principal concerns of the University Grants Commission are coordination and maintenance of standards, allocation and disbursement of grants, and its interface with institutions. Commission laid focus on development of education, raising of standards, improvement of quality of teaching and research. University Grants Commission has come a long way from 1956. In fact, University Grants Commission created common research and services facilities for the universities by establishing 7 inter-university centers. Some of them are the showpieces, like the Inter-University Accelerator Center in Delhi, Inter-University Center for Astronomy and Astrophysics in Pune, and UGC DAE Consortium of Atomic Energy in Indore with its branch offices in Calcutta and Bombay. University Grants Commission has made seminal contribution in different areas, including the institutionalization of the scholarships to meeting out the post-admission needs of the children, particularly coming from the marginalized sections of the society. Special assistance program, major and minor research projects, university with potential for excellence. Jaspal has talked about the human resource development centers for the purposes of ensuring continuous faculty development, Kaushal Kendra, and what not. UGC has made a seminal contribution in quantitative as well as qualitative expansion of higher education. But it has also attracted criticism because of its certain limitations, which are not in sync with the changing times. I would like to share with you that the UGC Act has been examined twice in the recent past with a view to ascertaining the relevance of the UGC in respect of emerging challenges of higher education arising out of national and international developments. Once it was examined by none other than Professor Amrik Singh in 1998, and second time by Shri R.P. Agrawal Committee in 2014. Interestingly, the common recommendation made by both the committees was about widening the scope and power of the UGC, with slight variation in its nomenclature. The external validation by 2 eminent committees amply justified the relevance and continuation of the University Grants Commission. While the Amrik Singh Committee proposed to rename it as Higher Education Commission, the R.P. Agrawal Committee suggested to call it as Higher Education and Research Commission. But the endorsement of existing role of the UGC by both the committees over a long interval of 16 years was a stark testimony to its forward-looking design and timeless and enduring potentials. A dispassionate analysis of the University Grants Commission Act, even in present times, reveals that it is the finest document ever made in the history of Indian higher education under the stewardship of Dr. Maulana Abul Kalam Azad. It's a very concise document with only 28 sections running into 16 pages. Every provision of the document, except the clause referring to the penalties, is so futuristic and so comprehensive that regardless of numerous reforms that have taken place in the past 7 years, it can address all the concerns of the present day higher education. One can't help but experience the deep imprints of the visionary leadership of the time headed by Maulana Abul Kalam Azad ji. Some experts, I would say unfortunately, are in a tearing hurry to wind up the current setup since 2005, regardless of the consequences. But there are tangible reasons for cautious optimism. They seem to have been understood much better by the public representatives in the parliament who installed it than the specialists. The Indian higher education indeed needs regulations to guarantee social equity and quality, and all the more significantly to forestall unreasonable practices. The notion that the existing setup, which has nurtured and brought the system thus far, has completely outlived its utility and is wholly irrecoverable, seems a bit far-fetched to position. The recommendations made by Amrik Singh Committee and Agrawal Committee are worth a try to save both time and resources that could instead be invested for the advancement of the universities, which are starving of funds as a result of sluggish economy and slight weight. Sometimes it is better to look into the past in order to prepare for a bright future. It may be prudent to keep a sense of perspective and give the regulatory part of reforms a deeper and more thoughtful consideration prior to effecting structural changes of any kind. Dismantling 3 national level resource institutions and creating 5 may not be a very good idea at this point in time. It becomes all the more necessary as the proposal is to replace one commission set up under the stewardship of no less a person than Maulana Dr. Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar and nurtured by the likes of C.D. Deshmukh, D.S. Kothari, Professor Yashpal and Dr. Manmohan Singh by another commission. All these 3 organizations, ladies and gentlemen, which have made seminal contribution both in school and higher education, are the brainchildren of Maulana Abul Kalam Azad ji. He was indeed a sanguine man with visionary ideas who would forever be remembered as a noble soul. Let us pay tributes to the efforts he made to put India on the path of progress. And the best way to pay homage to Maulana Azad today, when we are celebrating his 134th birth anniversary in the form of National Education Day, would be to follow his ideals and learn out of his experiences, especially the art of maximizing the potential of limited resources for scientific and technological advancements of the country, and the significance of visionary leadership in education, as it is education which fuels all other sectors of economy. With these words, I would like to express my sincere thanks and gratitude to the organizers of today's event. I would also like to express my sincere thanks to all the participants who have participated in this today's program. Thank you very much.